Morning, all. All right, so I'm going to start the day off talking about the Buffalo Sabres. So, this channel came into existence in 2016. And I remember there being some optimism around the Sabres. I want to say the summer of 2017, that there were some moves made and that there was some idea that, hey, the Sabres could be good this year. And I didn't really see it. I was like, nah, I don't think they're going to be much better. And I got some negative feedback on that. But I feel like this year there should be a lot of optimism. I feel like this is a team that can absolutely compete. And they've been out of the playoffs for so long. I'm really rooting for them at this stage. They did finish third in goals for this past season, but they were 26th in goals against. So if they can keep that offense up and if they can improve the defense, they're in good shape. I will say they may sacrifice some goals scored this year to get some goals against off the board, and that could be the best move because, again, if they can get those goals against down, they're in the playoffs. They're a playoff team. So we'll get to the defense, but I want to talk about the forward group first. And I also want to point out that I've got a brown asterisk next to ones that are going to be unrestricted next summer, a blue asterisk next to those that are going to be restricted free agents next summer. And when you look at this team's roster, and this is going to be up in the air about who's going to play which position and where. So again, not getting into who's on what line. But if you look down what could be the left side for them, you've got Skinner. Excellent back-to-back seasons for him. Good. Not as much complaining about his contract now as there was 2 years ago. Middlestad, I really think he took a step this past year. I do, and I think that Middlestad, for all the people who were calling him a bust a couple years ago, he'll never be a star player, I don't think, in the NHL, but a solid top six forward, absolutely. You need those. Then there's Jordan Greenway. Fascinating, he was added from Minnesota. How will he do out of the gate with Buffalo this year? Gergenson's re-signed. He's on a one-year contract, so he's unrestricted. Middlestad is a restricted free agent next summer, so contract year, maybe Middlestad puts up some good numbers. Kulik is going to be an interesting one to watch. He had 24 goals in the AHL and seemed to pick it up quickly. So will Kulik get called up? Where will he fit in? You got to think there's going to be injuries because there always is with every team in the NHL. I do think Buffalo's depth, not too bad. Bureau is another example, and Bureau's on an expiring contract. He'll be restricted free agent next summer. He had 51 points in 49 games playing for the Rochester Americans last year. So that's good, and that's what you need, right? You need that depth up front. Then down the middle, you've got Tage Thompson, who proved that the previous year wasn't a fluke by upping his totals across the board, 47 goals. Probably should have had 50. Maybe he gets there this year. Cousins really came into his own last year as well. Peyton Krebs still finding his way a bit. He's in a contract year. He's a restricted free agent next summer. Jost has fit in well here. He's UFA next summer. Savoy will be an interesting one too because Savoy projects as being a very good forward in the NHL, top 10 draft pick, but right now probably not on their roster. So where does Savoy play? What do you do with him? And if he has a very good training camp, let's just say he has a very good training camp, how does this work? Does Jost just come out of the lineup? Does Krebs go down to the fourth line? Cousins on the third? Does Cousins end up on the wing? Does Savoy end up on the wing? This is where things get interesting. Again, in Buffalo, their lineup, very fluid this past season. It feels like Don Granado's willing to do whatever it takes to find that combination that works. So it'll be fascinating to see if Savoy goes in and has a really good training camp, who ends up playing where. Justin Richards, expiring contract for him. He got into a couple of games last year. On the right-hand side, Alex Tuck, when healthy, is a very effective forward. Really, really solid pickup for them. Olofsson, he's on an expiring contract. He's an unrestricted free agent next summer. I like Olofsson. Good 20 to 25 goal scorer, 50-point producer. You need those. And on the power play, he's pretty solid. Peterka. At some point in time, Peterka's going to be a top six forward in the NHL. That may arrive this year. Maybe he pushes Olofsson down, or maybe they just have three scoring lines and try to deal with that impediment that most teams would love to have, right? Okposo, re-signed, sticks around. He's the captain. And Okposo has really evolved into that role as a leader. When he signed that $6 million a year contract years back, it was more to be that top six points producer that he'd been prior. But now, on a cheaper contract in just the 1 year, he's there to be the leader, and I think he performs that role well. Rusek. Does Rusek make the team? He had 56 points last year in the AHL. There's some upside there. Now, of course, Jack Quinn is injured. So while Jack Quinn is out, this is going to leave things wide open for someone to take his spot. And then when Jack Quinn comes back, you have a pretty solid situation in Buffalo where, yeah, you're going to have to take a good player out of the lineup to get Quinn in there. And it's something that I can't remember Buffalo having this kind of a luxury over the time, again, that this channel's been around, certainly. And then you've got Isaac Rosen. When does Rosen make it to the team? And this is why when I talk about, you can't have too many draft picks. You can't have too many top draft picks. So if Rosen ended up being a bust, then it's not going to really hurt them because there's so many good young players in the lineup as it is. So the more prospects and draft picks you have, the better. Because then if one is a bust or one just doesn't quite live up to advanced billing, you've got others there as well. Now, the forward group is, I think, really solid and should be able to stay at least in the top 10 when it comes to scoring. Because from one season to the next, things change. But on the blue line, I really like what this team's got going on. You've got Samuelsson, you've got Dahlin. Now, Dahlin's a restricted free agent next summer. They're working on an extension with him. He makes $6 million a year now. He's going to make more than that with the extension. And then you've got Owen Power on the second pairing. He's a restricted free agent next summer. So's Jokiharju. So really good young defense there. Owen Power's going to get paid a ton. So while their cap space currently is $6,713,930 according to Cap Friendly, once Power and Dahlin get paid for contracts starting next year, that's going to eat into next year's cap space, but the cap's going up. So they're in a good position right now to really build this up. And then you've got Eric Johnson was signed to a one-year deal coming out of Colorado. We know what Johnson can do. They added Connor Clifton as well out of Boston. And when I look at all this, I think to myself, is there a trade coming? The reason I say this is because then you've got Bryson, you've got Lyubushkin, you've got Stillman, you've got Clegg. Those are 10 guys who legitimately can work a shift in the NHL as a defenseman. Now, I know that Stillman had a rough year in Vancouver. It didn't necessarily get a lot better for him in Buffalo. So if he ended up, getting sent to the minors, I don't think that would be too shocking. But with the number of defensemen they have here and the amount of money they're paying Clifton, $3.3 million, I don't know if they want him on the third pairing or the second. And with Lyubushkin there and Clegg, and then you've got Davies, who's on an expiring deal as well, Komarov, Johnson, so Ryan Johnson coming in. He's going to be an interesting one to watch. He's the final piece from the Ryan O'Reilly deal. So, you could end up in a situation where Buffalo trades a blue liner in order to add more depth up front, but do they need that? Or did they trade a blue liner in order to get a goaltender? Because do they need a goaltender or not is a valid question. One thing with Buffalo, very good, exciting young team. There are some veterans up front. Adding Eric Johnson on the blue line is important because look at this. Samuelsson, young. Dahlin's young. Jokiharju, Power. They're all young defensemen. Clifton, a little bit more experience with him. But Eric Johnson is an experienced blue liner and can really hold things down there. But in the net, you've got Levi, you've got Comrie as presumptively your 1-2. Comrie's in the final year of a contract. He's UFA next summer. Luukkonen then would end up in the minors. And Tokarski in the AHL, of course, veteran goaltender. He's on a one-year deal. But do they go with Luukkonen and Levi? Do they potentially waive Comrie? Do they try to move Luukkonen to get help elsewhere if Levi's going to be the guy and if Comrie's going to be the backup? So there's some interesting questions here, and I'm not saying Luukkonen is necessarily getting traded, just throwing that out there. What does Kevyn Adams do? Because what he's got here is he's got a team that's pretty solid. The trading of Jack Eichel, I think, worked for both teams. Eichel gets the Stanley Cup in Vegas. They have to be ecstatic with what they got with Eichel. But if Eichel was still in Buffalo, they would not have won the Cup this year. I don't know that they would have made the playoffs. So I would say that Buffalo, even though you've seen Eichel carry the Stanley Cup around, probably still happy to have had the trade happen. And really, that was a divorce that had needed to happen for a while. And you get Tuck out of that deal. Tuck's been absolutely excellent for them. Krebs has a lot of potential as well. And other pieces were involved in that trade too. So I'll be interested to see how this team does this year, but they have to fix that 26th in goals against. If they're leaky in their own end, which again is why you pick up Johnson, and maybe you go out and figure out, a goaltender. Like, for instance, if Connor Hellebuck was willing to go to Buffalo, what could that look like? If you added Connor Hellebuck, you have Hellebuck and Levi as your goaltending tandem? They're a playoff team then, right? And so, I'm not saying that as any kind of, slight towards Levi, but he doesn't have a lot of experience. He's a young goaltender. I think if you throw them into the fire right now, I don't like doing that. I think there's some risk to that with a young goaltender. But I'd be interested to know your thoughts. What do you think Buffalo is going to do between now and the start of the season? I don't think this is done because, again, to me, there's just too many NHL experienced defensemen here. Tells me that Kevin Adams might be looking to move one or two pieces. But what are you moving him for? Are you moving him for more draft picks? Probably not. Prospects, maybe if they're close, but prospects where? Again, I feel like there's some experience in this lineup. This is a team that really could have used an addition of a Corey Perry type up front. But again, where would he play? And so that's the question I have is what needs to be fixed, or does nothing need to be fixed? Do you go into this coming season with that $6.7 million in cap space and have yourself in the catbird seat once we get to the trade deadline? Because Buffalo could be one of those teams that's in the mix, and they're able to add a big name because they got a ton of cap space. That cap space, remember, it accrues during the season, so you're able to take on a bigger contract later in the year than you are earlier in the year if you keep that cap space. Let me know your thoughts. I think Buffalo is going to be one of the more interesting teams to watch this coming season because it's been so long since they made the playoffs. And this past season, they did put up a .555 points percentage, their best season since the last time they made the playoffs, where they had a .585. So if they can get to around a .585 or a 600 points percentage, maybe they're in the playoffs again. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.